Hello and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. President Lee Jae-myung is in Brussels, the first stop on his 10-day trip to Europe. He's scheduled to sit down for talks with European leaders, including the Belgian Prime Minister and top officials from the European Union. The United States has launched new strikes on Iran after President Donald Trump accused the country of shooting down a U.S. helicopter over the Strait of Hormuz. Following his rare visit to Pyongyang, Chinese President Xi Jinping sent a message to North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, saying bilateral ties have begun a new historical journey. The Chinese leader also reaffirmed the two countries' commitment to promoting regional peace and stability. President Lee Jae-myung has touched down in Brussels, the first leg of his 10-day trip to Europe. He will meet with European leaders, including the Belgian Prime Minister and leaders of the European Union. Our Yoon Jang-min is traveling with the president and files his report from Brussels.
The meeting between President Lee Jae-myung and Belgian Prime Minister Bart De Wever and King Philip on Wednesday takes place as the two countries celebrate 125 years of diplomatic ties. Expanding cooperation for small and medium-sized firms is high on the agenda, with Belgium being a key logistics hub in Europe and a biotech stronghold.
We will make sure that our companies actively make inroads into Belgium and lay the foundation for them to further expand across Europe.
There is also a focus on culture and education exchanges, such as expanding Korean studies at Leuven University and Ghent University in Belgium. Later in the day, President Lee will also meet with President of the European Council Antonio Costa and President of the European Commission Ursula von der Leyen, building upon their last meeting at the G7 summit in Canada.
We share similar values with the EU, such as a norms-based multilateral global order, democracy, and market economy. It is a crucial partner for us to upgrade ourselves into a diplomatic powerhouse as a member of G7+.
The leaders are expected to discuss increasing trade and economic growth amid growing global protectionism. The 27-member European bloc is South Korea's third-largest trading partner. They will also discuss bolstering security cooperation and joint efforts to tackle transnational crimes such as drugs and terrorism. In 2024, the two sides adopted a security and defense partnership. The leaders are also expected to address regional security on the Korean Peninsula and the Middle East and look to cooperate on energy and supply chains.
It is President Lee's first trip to the bloc since taking office, signaling his administration's fully fledged diplomacy with Europe amid complicated geopolitics. Yoon Jang-min, Arirang News, Brussels.
And staying in Brussels, President Lee Jae-myung has met members of the Korean community in Belgium and vowed to make a better Korea. During the meeting on Tuesday, Lee said the martial law declaration by his predecessor in 2024 and consequential changes must have concerned many overseas Koreans, but the country is recovering in a short period of time. He promised to make Korea a country that overseas Koreans can take pride in. On the economic front, Korea's real GDP for the first quarter of this year has been adjusted upward. Despite external uncertainties, Korea's chip exports have been doing even better than the Bank of Korea had predicted. Our Kim Do-yeon reports.
Korea's real gross domestic product expanded 1.8% in the first quarter of 2026 compared to the previous quarter. According to the Bank of Korea's preliminary data released Tuesday, this represents a 0.1 percentage point upward revision from the central bank's advanced estimate. On a yearly basis, the economy grew 3.8%. The stronger reading was supported by final data indicating faster than expected progress in display and semiconductor investments. Overall facility investments surged 6.6%, while private consumption increased 0.6%. Exports advanced 5.9% on quarter, heavily backed by global demand for IT products like semiconductors.
The 0.1 percentage point upward revision to the first quarter real GDP will act to raise the annual growth rate by 0.1 percentage point for the entire year.
The most notable shift during the first quarter was the unprecedented surge in national income. Nominal GDP jumped 10.5% on quarter, marking the highest level since the first quarter of 1976. Real gross national income rose a record 9.2% from the previous quarter, sharply outpacing actual production growth. The central bank added that the GDP deflator rose 12.9% year-on-year due to the surge in semiconductor export prices, which significantly improved corporate profitability. The central bank attributed the unusual income surge directly to these improved terms of trade.
As the price of our key export, semiconductors, has surpassed the price increases of energy like crude oil, our main import, an unusual situation has occurred where GDI has significantly outpaced GDP.
If this corporate performance and nominal growth trend continues, Bank of Korea officials project the nation's per capita gross national income could reach its next major milestone much earlier than the previously anticipated target of 2028. For 2025, per capita GNI stood at $36,963. 김도현, Arirang News.
The Kospi has been on a roller coaster lately, and Korea's fear index has hit a record high, even surpassing levels seen after the outbreak of the Iran war. For more on the domestic economy, we're joined today by Professor Shin Myung-gyu, Associate Professor of Economics at Yonsei University. Professor Shin, thanks for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
So what exactly is driving this market anxiety, and what should investors be watching most closely?
I think what we are seeing is not simply a reaction to one particular event, but an accumulation of uncertainty from multiple sources. And most importantly, investors are simultaneously facing questions about global trade policy, interest rates, geographical risk, and corporate earnings. When several uncertainties emerge at the same time, financial markets naturally become much more volatile than before. And another important factor is the growing linkage between the Korean and the US semiconductor sectors. Korea's stock market is heavily weighted towards semiconductor companies whose valuations are increasingly tied to the expectations about the global AI cycle. As a result, sharp movements in major US chip stocks can quickly spill over into the Kospi index, amplifying both gains and losses, even when domestic fundamentals remain largely unchanged. So rather than focusing on day-to-day price movements, I think investors should pay closer attention to the underlying fundamentals like the corporate earnings, inflation rate, and monetary policy, and the sustainability of the AI-related investment.
I see. And the Korean won has fallen to its weakest level against the US dollar in decades right now. What's behind this, and has the government's efforts to stabilize the currency made any difference?
Yeah, the recent weakness of the Korean won reflects a combination of global and domestic factors. Globally, investors have become more cautious due to the uncertainty surrounding the trade policy in the US, interest rate, and the geographic risk, which I said before. And in periods like this, capital tends to flow toward traditionally believed to be safe haven assets like the US dollars. And Korea is particularly sensitive to these shifts because it is a highly open economy with a strong dependence on the international trade and global capital flows. Also, in terms of uncertainty, investors typically adopt a flight to safety strategies, moving capital toward the US dollar assets, like in this kind of situation. And because Korea is a small and highly open economy, the Korean won tends to react more strongly to these shifts in the global sentiment. And about the government responses, I think further intervention and the commitment to address excessive volatility can be helpful in preventing the market movements, but because it sends a signal that policymakers are closely monitoring the market and prepared to act if necessary. But such an intervention alone cannot permanently change the direction of the exchange rate if the underlying global factors remain unchanged. In the long run, exchange rates are driven more by economic fundamentals and investors' confidence than by the short-term policy measures.
Right, and starting today, cacao workers are set to go on strike after wage talks with management broke down, right? How much disruption could this cause?
I think the immediate disruption is likely to be kind of limited, unless in terms of core services. Large digital platforms like Kakao typically have substantial system redundancy and automated operators, making unlikely that essential services like messaging will suddenly stop because of the short-term labor dispute. But that does not mean that strike is unimportant. The more meaningful impact may appear in areas such as software development, platform upgrades, customer support, and the pace of innovation if the dispute continues for a longer time. And this seems to reflect a wider trend that we have seen in the Korea's tech sectors, as we have seen for the Samsung. During the periods of rapid growth, workers become accustomed to rising wages and generous bonuses. As growth has slowed, firms are becoming more cautious about compensation and creating tensions between changing business conditions and the existing expectations by the workers.
Right, you just mentioned Samsung and changing business conditions, and we're seeing more and more Korean companies facing disputes over bonus payouts and compensation, right? Do you think Samsung's recent wage deal has actually played a role in raising expectations among workers? And more broadly, how has Korea's labor landscape changed recently?
To me, Samsung's agreement may have reinforced expectations among workers, especially the IT workers, but I would be cautious about viewing it as the primary cause. Rather, it serves as a benchmark in a broader transformation that has already been taking place across Korea's labor market. As I pointed out a minute ago, during the high growth period, many workers can expect higher wages and generous performance bonuses. But as the growth becomes slower and the environment becomes more uncertain, the firms are more cautious about compensation. And also, the rapid adoption of AI and automation is increasing uncertainty about the future employment and career opportunities from the perspective of the workers. When people become less certain about their future income and job security, it is quite natural for them to place greater value on securing compensation and workplace protections today. And this may partly explain why employees are becoming more vocal about wages, bonuses, and working conditions. And also, at the same time, Korea's labor landscape has also evolved. Employees are placing greater emphasis on transparency, fairness, work-life balance, and participation in decision-making, rather than focusing solely on bonus wages. So these disputes not simply as a kind of disagreement over pay, but they are all the kind of the parts of broader adjustment to the slower growth economy.
I see. All right, Professor Shim, thank you so much for your time and insight this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Tensions are escalating in the Middle East once again as the United States carries out military strikes against Iran following the downing of an American helicopter. Our Bunyeran has the details.
The United States has launched military strikes against Iran in response to the downing of a U.S. Army helicopter near the Strait of Hormuz, marking a major escalation in tensions between Washington and Tehran. According to U.S. Central Command, American forces began strikes at 5 p.m. Eastern Time on Tuesday, describing the operation as a proportional response to unjustified Iranian aggression. Iran was quick to respond, with its foreign minister taking to social media to warn that Tehran would leave no attack or threat unanswered, and that US forces should leave the region. Iranian media reported that explosions were heard in the strait shortly after CENTCOM's announcement, with state media later reporting that the strikes appeared to be winding down. The strikes follow the downing of a US Army Apache helicopter near the coast of Oman on Monday, from which the 2 crew members were rescued unharmed. US President Donald Trump accused Iran of bringing down the aircraft and said the United States must of necessity respond to this attack. According to the Associated Press, a US official said investigators believe the helicopter collided with an Iranian drone, although it remains unclear whether the collision was intentional. Iran, for its part, neither confirmed nor denied any involvement, with a semi-official Mir news agency stopping short of claiming responsibility. The latest developments cast doubt on Trump's claims that an Israel-Iran peace deal was close after he had warned both sides that weekend clashes were jeopardizing negotiations between Washington and Tehran. He had told reporters that a peace deal was in its final stages and that the Strait of Hormuz would reopen immediately after an agreement was reached. 문혜련, Arirang News.
Israel has launched fresh strikes across southern Lebanon despite Iran's warning to halt attacks, raising fears of renewed regional escalation. The violence comes as efforts continue to preserve a fragile ceasefire and advance broader negotiations aimed at ending the conflict involving Israel, Iran, and its regional allies. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
Israel has carried out a new wave of air and artillery strikes across southern Lebanon, despite warnings from Iran to halt attacks. Lebanon's health ministry said at least 13 people were killed on Tuesday, including 2 in a pre-dawn drone strike near the southern city of Nabateh. The Israeli military also issued fresh evacuation orders for the coastal city of Tyre, instructing residents to move north of the Zerani River. For the first time, the warning included the city's Christian quarter, where Israel claims Hezbollah fighters had recently been operating. The latest strikes come just days after Israel and Iran exchanged attacks following Israeli strikes on Beirut, targeting the Iran-backed Hezbollah group. Although Israel and Iran paused hostilities on Monday, Tehran warned it could resume attacks if Israeli operations in Lebanon continue. Israel, however, has vowed to press ahead with its campaign against Hezbollah, raising concerns about a broader regional escalation and complicating U.S. President Donald Trump's efforts to broker a wider deal aimed at ending the conflict involving the United States, Israel, and Iran. Lebanon became directly involved in the war in March when Hezbollah launched rockets into Israel, prompting a large-scale Israeli air campaign and ground operations in southern Lebanon. According to Lebanon's health ministry, more than 3,600 people have been killed since the conflict intensified. Israeli authorities say 30 soldiers and 4 civilians have also died in cross-border fighting. The United Nations estimates that nearly 1 million people in Lebanon remain displaced and about 1.4 million need humanitarian assistance. A U.S.-brokered ceasefire reached in April has failed to stop the violence, with clashes continuing despite the agreement. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Chinese President Xi Jinping has thanked North Korean leader Kim Jong-un for the hospitality shown during his 2-day state visit to Pyongyang, saying ties between the two countries have entered a new historical journey. According to the Korean Central News Agency on Wednesday, Xi said in a message sent after returning to China that talks with Kim produced important agreements and added new momentum to bilateral relations. He also reaffirmed both countries' commitment to strengthening traditional ties and promoting regional peace and stability. Meanwhile, Kim's daughter Chue did not appear at any official events during Xi's visit, despite expectations that Pyongyang could use the visit to send signals about the future leadership of the regime. In Korea's southern port city of Busan, the city's former mayoral residence, once a symbol of authority long closed off to the public, has been reborn as a public space. It's attracted more than 500,000 visitors in just over a year. Our Kim Seong reports.
A quiet path leads up to a wide garden and open buildings. Visitors chat, take in ocean views, and capture the moment on camera. As the sun grows stronger, some pause in the shade, enjoying a quiet cup of tea. Inside, the space offers exhibitions, reading areas, rest zones, and educational programs, all brought together at Domoheon.
I came here because I heard it was a famous filming location, but it also has a beautiful garden, an exhibition hall, and a cafe. It's a great place.
Domoheon officially opened to the public in September 2024, after the former mayoral residence was transformed into a multi-purpose space for citizens. Since then, it has continued to attract both residents and tourists, recently surpassing 500,000 cumulative visitors. At the heart of its popularity is its founding theme, walk, stay, and remember. Built in 1984 and once reserved for top officials, the once restricted compound has now become an open, welcoming place for the public. Kim Seoyoung, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Domoheon, and this is The World Now. In the UK, hundreds of protesters took to the streets of Belfast on Tuesday, setting vehicles on fire following a knife attack the day before. Masked youth set fire to vehicles, including a bus, and broke windows of homes across the city as police deployed armored vehicles. This followed a knife attack on Monday, over which the police have charged a Sudanese man with attempted murder. The victim of the knife attack was seriously injured with slash wounds to his face and back. Members of the public were credited by police with saving his life before officers arrived. The knife attack suspect had been granted leave to remain in the United Kingdom in 2023 after claiming asylum. Northern Ireland's political leaders jointly condemned the horrific attack and the riots and have called for calm. In Kenya, police shot dead a protester on Tuesday as hundreds demonstrated against a U.S.-backed Ebola quarantine facility. Eyewitnesses said the man died from a gunshot wound to the head. 2 people were also killed at the same site last week. A high court judge has twice ordered the government to halt construction at the military base, but U.S. aircraft have continued flying in staff and equipment. The Kenya Human Rights Commission said on Tuesday that hooded police fired live bullets and arrested 19 protesters. The 50-bed facility near Nanyuki is intended for Americans exposed to Ebola who are still asymptomatic. The Democratic Republic of Congo's confirmed Ebola cases rose to 598 on Tuesday, with 115 deaths in one of the largest outbreaks ever recorded. NASA named 4 astronauts on Tuesday for its Artemis III mission, a spacecraft docking demonstration next year that will test moon landers from SpaceX and Blue Origin for the first time in space. U.S. astronauts Andre Douglas, Frank Rubio, and Randy Bresnik, along with European Space Agency astronaut Luca Parmitano, will launch late next year aboard NASA's Orion capsule. The mission will not approach the moon, but will test docking with SpaceX's Starship and Blue Origin's Blue Moon landers in low Earth orbit before a future crewed lunar landing. In Japan, a bear has been captured after a multi-day hunt that shut all 94 schools in the Japanese city of Utsunomiya and kept residents indoors for days. The black bear, weighing around 100 kilograms, was first seen on Saturday. It was shot with a tranquilizer gun in a residential area and taken away in a cage on Tuesday. But authorities are keeping schools closed on Wednesday over reports of a possible second bear in the area. Bear attacks have reached record levels in Japan, with 238 casualties, including 13 deaths recorded between April 2025 and April 2026.
The capital region woke up to cloudy skies and heat will ease across central Korea today as rain moves into the region. Meanwhile, southern regions will remain much warmer with highs nearing 30 degrees Celsius this afternoon. And about the rain, most of the central areas will see 5 to 30 millimeters of rainfall through the evening. However, it's a completely different story for the southern parts of Korea with plenty of sunshine and strong UV rays. UV levels will be very high in the afternoon, while the northern parts of Jeju will see the highest level. So sun safety is a must for those in southern regions. And this afternoon, Seoul getting up to 25 degrees, Daejeon will rise to 27, and air quality will be normal to good nationwide. The central regions will stay below norms with a higher chance of rain through the rest of the week.
Now that's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching.